Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome. Shout out to all my Joy of Coding group members out there. I'm Emily, and I help start the Joy of Coding Academy, and I am so excited to chat with you today and share really my perspective on this question that I've been seeing around the internet a bunch. And so I just wanted to answer it, just in case you guys had this question too. So one of the things I've been seeing lately is people are saying that full stack developers are impossible. They can no longer exist. That the systems that we're creating on the internet are so broad that this term full stack developer isn't even appropriate anymore. And so some people say it's impossible. Some people say, I am a full stack developer. What do you mean it's impossible? So who's right? So what's the scoop? What's the story? So today we are going to dive deep into that. Like, what does it mean to be a full stack developer? And so I think that really is the first question is what's a full stack developer? Like, what does that even mean? So if you are new to the space of learning to become a six-figure software developer or to become a coder, there's a couple different areas that you can become a coder in. So for example, you could become a web developer. And so a web developer is someone that creates not just the websites, but what makes them dynamic and interactive. And so there's two flavors of web development. There's the front end. That's the part that we as users often see and interact with. It's what's showing up in the web browser. And so that's one side of the equation. And then there's the back end, right? So at some point, every website that you interact with is executing and living on a server. This is a computer somewhere else in the world that's hooked up to the internet, whose only purpose is to serve up web pages, right? And so there's the front end piece, which is what the code that gets executed in your browser on your computer to render or show you the web page. And then there's what comes in on the back end, right? And so the back end information hangs out on a server somewhere on the internet. And so because there's this client side and this server side code, right, we've had these two emerging ideas of front end and back end. And if you're watching today, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love getting to interact with you guys. Let me know that you're here. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them. So what does it mean to be a full stack developer, right? So a full stack developer has front end and back end knowledge. There's a couple different ways that people have used the term full stack though. So for example, some people believe a full stack developer is capable of building an end-to-end web application. So a complete website that's interactive that goes both from the front end to the back end and doesn't need a development team, right? So that's one view of a full stack developer. And I think when people argue that full stack developers are impossible, right? This impossible idea of a solo person building the whole application, I think that has some merit because modern web systems have been growing increasingly complex. Every week, it seems, a new technology comes out, a new technology comes out, a new framework comes out, a new library comes out. And so, our society, the technologists in our society are rapidly evolving the technical infrastructure around the web to better meet what users want and to better meet our needs. And so it is growing and it's very complex and it's growing really fast. And so it can be a full-time job to stay up to date on some of these latest technologies. So if you view being a full stack developer as being able to create a modern web application that's scalable to millions of users with no one else, that might be a unicorn, right? That might be super challenging to find. Like there's not going to be very many people that can do that. However, the way I most often see full stack developer used as a term is not, are you a one-stop shop for building application? Because that is a little bit different, right? So a full stack developer traditionally has knowledge of both the front end and the back end, right? So you're able to kind of create some of the pieces of the front end and some of the pieces on the back end in at least one technology platform. So for example, if you're working in front end, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of frameworks, a lot of languages that are used. Same with the back end, right? There's a lot of choices out there. And so being a full stack developer is this idea that you can create on the front end at least enough to get an interface going to collect data that you can then feed into the back end of your application and start connecting and working with a database, right? So a full stack developer really includes all of these pieces: front end, back end, and then the database. Sometimes people lump databases in with the back end. What back end terminology usually means is that you know how to use a back end web framework that's running on the server side, and you've got some facility with the command line, right? So you can get things up and running when you need them. You can check out the server logs, you can kind of debug problems, and you understand how to work with the database and to keep those systems running and working smoothly. So from that perspective, if your view, like mine, of full stack developer is someone who can create on both sides of a web application, on the front end and the back end, then full stack developers are totally possible. I think what's infeasible to expect one person to know is every detail of every front end and back end web technology and framework and how to use them. That is not fully feasible because there's just so many technologies and they're growing so fast. But if your view is of a full stack developer as having comfort and the ability to create in some form on both the front end and the back end, that is totally, totally feasible, totally possible, totally feasible. And really, if you want to get a job as a full stack developer, that's what you need to get started. You don't need to know every single language that's out there. You don't need to know every single framework that comes out every week. And you don't have to be an expert in them. What you need is that foundation so that you can have this place to start from to deepen your learning. Because as programmers and developers, we're all always learning, right? We can't know it all because the systems change and grow too fast. So what we need is that foundation on those essential principles that don't change, like how do the front end and the back end interact? And then there's programming language and framework specific things that we want to know as well. So for example, how do they interact in React? How do they interact with Django, right? How do they interact with Angular or Ruby on Rails or PHP or whatever ecosystem that you're developing in? You know, where do these things come to play? Awesome, awesome. So that's really the first piece, is what is a full stack developer? And what some people have also said, I have heard, researching around, is that sometimes a full stack developer is actually an integrator. So once you get onto a bigger company, which has maybe a team of 20 or 30 software developers, how do you interact there? So when we have a number of software developers working in a company, a full stack developer is probably not responsible solely for all of the material and all of the code that's happening in that system. They probably are working with teams of front-end developers and teams of back-end developers and working on helping them integrate those pieces. So actually they can start to be, they're a technologist, but they're also a communicator and they're an integrator. And so that's how things transition once you get to a medium-sized company. This is in contrast to when you first start out. So the companies that are largely looking for full stack developers and need full stack developers are going to be startups. These are people that have the seed of an idea. Maybe they've started a little bit and they're growing and they can't really afford to hire a full development team with experts on everything. So they need a jack of all trades who might not be an expert in every area, but knows enough to get things going for them, right? And I've definitely had students who their entry-level job was as a full stack developer for a startup, because that's who they're looking for, a diamond in the rough. They're looking for someone who's really, really competent, who can make things happen on the front end and the back end, but maybe who isn't very expensive yet because they're just starting out, right? And so startup companies are going to be looking for that, for someone who's on track to be a multi-six-figure developer, but who hasn't yet gotten there, who's not there yet, who's just getting started. And they're hoping to kind of integrate them into their company and hopefully hire them and have them stay around for a while. And so there's really a couple different views, right? The startup company full stack developer is just looking for a jack of all trades. Might be a master of none, that's okay, but they know what they need to create on the front and the back end, and then they're also able to learn and teach themselves what they need on the job, right? Because as programmers, we're always learning. That's the way it is. And then once you get and work your way up to a larger company who's got a team of software developers, the full stack developer may not be solely responsible for any one aspect of the application, but might instead be integrating what different teams are doing. And there's gradations in between that, right? Like you could be for a small company, you could be a full stack developer, and maybe your job is to own a feature and you own that source code for that feature from the front end to the back end, right? And so you're going to be able to implement the changes on that feature much more effectively, much more quickly, because you don't have to communicate to a bunch of other people, right? So that's going to work for a smaller size company with very, very small development teams. And I think, so finally, what I'd like to conclude with today is how do we keep up with the trends, right? So if you are on the path and you'd like to become a full stack developer, and to be honest, I help students become full stack developers in my role inside the Joy of Coding Academy, and I've helped students get jobs at startups as well as full stack developers. So it's not impossible. It does require some learning. How do we keep up with the trends, right? If you want to become a full stack developer, what does this look like? So just to give you an idea, a full stack developer will have knowledge of the front end. And if you've never studied coding before, don't worry, I'm going to throw a lot of acronyms at you. So this is for those that have started their learning, they're on the path and they want to deepen it. So with front end, we're dealing with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Those are the big three. And again, if you've been watching me at all, you know I don't recommend jumping into JavaScript first. I recommend working on your problem-solving skills, honing your development process, so when you dive into the complexities that are modern web applications, you have some basic technical abilities to fall back on. Not for long, just a couple weeks, but I find that super, super helpful to kind of give students a leg up. So we also want to be paying attention to something called responsive or adaptive design. So right now, in the context of this live, I'm only sharing the buzzwords, but if you have additional, if you'd like me to go deeper on any of these topics in a future live, totally happy to do it. Just feel free to post your questions in the comments. I'd love to answer them. So JavaScript, you'll want to know at least one framework on the front end, either Angular, React, Vue. There's a couple others, right? They keep coming out all the time. Node.js, right, is another framework for JavaScript. TypeScript, right? There's so many different ones, and there's testing frameworks you can work on, and then there's back-end development. So like things like PHP, Node.js, Ruby, Python, C# or Java. And the thing is you don't need to know all of those, right? You don't need to learn all of those technologies. You need to have facility with one and have done it once so that you have that grounding, those fundamentals that you can then learn how to pick other things up. And then to complete your education as a full stack developer, you'll want to have some knowledge of databases. The industry standard is MySQL, but you could also investigate NoSQL databases like MongoDB, or if you're interested in mobile, SQLite is another one. There's a ton out there. I think the key is focusing and prioritizing, because you could still Google this stuff, right? I'm giving you the terms you can Google, you can go deep. But how much do you really need to know of these things? So my recommendation is always to start with the fundamentals, have that firm foundation, and then pick a project and go after it. Because at the end of the day, you could spend like every waking moment learning this stuff and still never get it. So how does anyone function with imperfect knowledge, right? We have to somehow create software that works and does something useful for other people when we have imperfect knowledge of everything that's out there, right? This is unusual for many fields, right? Like computer science and programming, man, we have it a little bit different, where like the field is changing as we're building in it, as we're creating in it. So what you want to have, this is my recommendation, is to pick a platform, right? Do a little research to pick a platform that makes sense for you and the types of systems you'd like to create. But don't overdo it. Give yourself a timeline and say, I'm going to take an hour and I'm going to make this decision. Like don't take a week. Take like an hour, right? Do some Googling, maybe post to some message boards, and then pick. And then go for it and try and get a system up and running. Because what that will do, when you actually try to build something, ideally for someone else, not yourself, maybe you have a friend or family member or relative that would benefit from some software. The thing is that when you have an actual concrete program that you're trying to create for, it helps cut out all the noise, because now all of a sudden you're focused, right? Oh, do I need to learn this or this? Well, this one's going to get me closer to my goal faster. Well, I'm going to learn that. And I would love to learn that. That's so cool, right? We're down the tutorial rabbit hole here. That looks so amazing. I'm going to put it on my future to-do list for after. Because really, being a good developer is all about learning to prioritize our time and choosing to invest it in ways that are going to pay off down the road. We can start that right from day one. We don't have to understand absolutely everything. We need to understand enough fundamentals that we can make progress easily. And then we need the specific solution for whatever we're trying to tackle right now. And while you're tackling that specific solution, you're going to be building that bigger picture thinking so that you can go and then implement in another framework, in another ecosystem, in another language, right? So we don't have to know it all. We have to know enough to get started, dive deep, and have that strong foundation. Awesome. So those are my recommendations for getting started. And then also included in that back-end, in the full stack developer ecosystem, in addition to front-end, back-end, and databases, you do want to make sure that you've actually deployed an application, right? Either with, there's Heroku or AWS, Firebase is another database you can use from Google. There's a bunch of options, but just getting an application up there and deployed so other people can see it, use it, and work with it and play with it. Now, you might be wondering, I've been saying find someone else to build software for. And you might be wondering why I'm suggesting that. And it's not because I want to make life difficult for people trying to learn, but because when we build software for ourselves, at the end of the day, are we going to push ourselves as hard as somebody else? Like if you go and you're like, I'm going to start exercising, right? If you go with a partner and let's say one day, I don't feel like exercising, your partner is there to keep you going. And so in learning software development, having someone else outside of you saying, no, it really needs to be this way is going to push you to learn in ways you wouldn't push yourself, right? It's going to push you outside of your comfort zone. And so I would hate for you to be robbed of that opportunity. If you want to start with your own projects just to understand things and build little toy things, awesome, go for it. But when you're ready to start really showcasing your skills to potential employers, creating your GitHub profile, right? You're creating Git repos where you're putting your code out there. When you dive deep, and you only need 1 or 2 projects like this, right? Deep dives, maybe 3 if you really want to push it. But you only need a couple. When you're doing that phase of your learning, you're really trying to get out there. I highly recommend that you find someone to help you like serve as your client for your project, your first user. And you don't do toy projects for other do the toy projects for learning, but not for showcasing your skills, because this also is going to send the message to employers that you're the type of person that just likes coding. The best developers enjoy coding and they do it all the time. Not necessarily imbalanced like every waking moment, but they want to code, they want to create. Like this, like code is a means of creation. It's like a palette like an artist would have for creating paint. And so you want to make sure that you're showcasing that side of yourself. And so it really, really helps. I can't emphasize that enough. And again, you just heard a bunch of technologies. And if you're not familiar with coding, then don't worry about it. Just recognize there's a ton of different technologies out there. It's like alphabet soup on the internet for sure. And so the challenge becomes, once we do learn the full stack ecosystem out there for building web applications, how do we keep up with it? Right? And so everything I said about how to get started learning, about diving in deep for a project, applies for keeping up with it as well. As you grow as a developer, you'll see if you enjoy working on all aspects of the application, or maybe you're like, gosh, I just love working with users. I want to work on front end all the time. I want to design the most amazing user experience I can, right? So that's one possible way. Or maybe you're like, I don't want to deal with users. This is not my cup of tea, but I love the back end. And so maybe that's where you'll dive in. So I think even though we can be full stack developers, I think in the long run, as we grow in our career, you may decide that you really like niching down into one particular area or ecosystem, and you'll totally geek out on that and go all out. Go to workshops, go to conferences, connect with others in your discipline, right, across companies, right? That could be your future. Or you might love being a jack of all trades, having some knowledge of all the system, but maybe you're not a master of the whole kit and caboodle. That's totally cool. And maybe you go work for startups all the time. Some startups pay really, really well, right? Because they want one rock solid developer to get their product launched and scalable and scale and grow to millions of users. And then maybe you manage a development team on the other side and you start growing the company that way. So there's a ton of different options for you out there. And for anyone watching today, I hope that if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. I'd love to answer them, love everybody's questions. And if you'd like to learn more about the process that I recommend following for becoming a six-figure developer in 6 months, in the next week, I think it's the end of next week, I'm hosting a free masterclass. It's 2 to 3 hours. It's a deep dive into how this process can work. So please, but you do have to register for it. So the link, I can post the link in the group. I can post it here on this live as well, so you can see it. I don't want you to miss out on that. It's live on Zoom, so we get to interact a little bit more, which I love. Okay, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions on this topic, or if you have other questions, right? I always love answering them and helping people, kickstart their careers. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you got a ton out of it. Again, I'm Emily with the Joy of Coding, and happy coding. Have a great day. Take care. Ooh, Kimmy, is it the same as the other masterclass? Ooh, good question. Thanks, Kimmy. It's going to be similar. It's a little bit different, but it is going to be pretty similar to the previous masterclass. Great question. Thanks for asking. Awesome, guys. Take care.